What up, everybody? It is Ravage, your favorite Final Fantasy YouTuber that you never heard of, back here again today with another non-Final Fantasy video. So, what I want to be talking about today is, we back on Star Wars, one of my favorite topics, Final Fantasy and Star Wars, probably my two favorite fictional universes of all time. I just finished rereading the Force Unleashed novel, and man, is that a banger of a book! I feel like the story greatly fits the novel format. Like it's much better as a novel because the games really lean super hard into the cool, over-the-top kind of power fantasy aspect, which don't get me wrong, I appreciate a game that does that. I'm a diehard Devil May Cry fan. But when you read the novel and you really get into the characters and the story and you realize The Force Unleashed actually had a magnificent story. Maybe you guys realized it when you were playing the game and I'm just illiterate unless there's a book in front of me and I can't tell that the story's good as long as there's flashing lights on the screen unless I'm playing Final Fantasy or Fire Emblem or something like that. I don't know. But what I wanted to talk about was actually something that stood out to me at the end of the book. There's this little passage at the end of the book that gives us a time frame that's kind of strange. Okay, so in the book, Galen's father had lived on Kashyyyk for 10 years. Now that's important. He lived on Kashyyyk for 10 years when Vader found him. I should specify that. And that's kind of important for a couple reasons, and I'm gonna circle back to this in a second. But in the Ahsoka series, right, there was this line when Ahsoka was battling Anakin that there was a huge brouhaha about. And it was Anakin telling Ahsoka she had not been his only apprentice. And so, of course, everybody loses their minds. We're like, oh my god, he's talking about Starkiller! Because who else would he be talking about? Now, granted, in Legends, he had plenty of different apprentices, but Galen is the most known and the most loved out of all of them. And I'm making this video to say, I think that theory's right. And the big thing is the time frame that we're given of Kento being on Kashyyyk for 10 years, because if Vader had another apprentice, right, Ahsoka's not his only one. I mean, Ahsoka was Anakin's apprentice, not Vader's, but, that... Shut up! There's also... What this made me think of was the first comic in one of the Vader comic runs that Disney did, where he went and fought Kirak in Phila to bleed his first lightsaber crystal and get his lightsaber. And in that comic, how Vader finds Kirak is he brings up a list of records of Jedi who took the Barash vow before the Clone Wars started. Now, that's important because Kento was on Kashyyyk for 10 years when Vader found him, and Galen was 4 years old. Now, to understand the significance of this, we have to know what year The Force Unleashed takes place. It takes place roughly 1 year after Order 66, the Great Jedi Purge. That means that Kento was on Kashyyyk a solid 6 years before the Clone Wars started, because the Clone Wars only lasted for 3 years, and the beginning of the game takes place about a year after Order 66. This also means Galen was born roughly at the beginning of the Clone Wars. And then Kento went to Kashyyyk 6 years before the events of Attack of the Clones. So he ended up on Kashyyyk between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Now, why is that significant? Because it could be very easy to just write it in as Kento is one of the Jedi who took the Barash vow. And that's how Vader found him, that's how Vader found Galen, and boom, we have Galen. All because of this line at the end of the Force Unleashed novel that gives us a timeline. A solid timeline to follow. Now, the rest of the game takes place, 14 years have passed? I think it takes place 15 years after Order 66, so it's like 4 years before the Battle of Yavin. which I think keeping history through the galaxy using a singular battle is dumb, but I understand why it's done, because that's what happens in the very first movie that started the largest sci-fi franchise in the world, or science fantasy franchise, however you put it. But I think the theory that Anakin was referring to Galen Merrick is very, very real. And the implication in that moment is that Galen is still alive. This means he probably never crossed blades with Vader or Sidious like he did in the game. He's out there somewhere. And that would be really cool to see Galen canonized and maybe even help Ahsoka and Ezra rebuild the Jedi Order with Luke. And maybe not repeat the scene of Luke essentially single-handedly causing the collapse of the new Jedi Order in The Last Jedi. I know that's always been a very controversial thing in the Star Wars fandom on whether you like or dislike the sequels. I've always disliked them, but I don't dislike Disney Star Wars. I dislike the sequels almost exclusively. I also really didn't like The Acolyte, but that's a video for another time. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, I think the theory, after rereading The Force Unleashed, that the theory that Anakin was talking about Galen is right. So I'm Ravage, your favorite Final Fantasy YouTuber that you never heard of, and this has been another Star Wars video. And just remember, the Force will be with you, always.